everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Our webinar today will be Understanding, Integrating, and Automating iForm Builder Data. I will be your host, MJ Niscoda, and your presenters for today will be Jonathan Su and Barrett Johannesson. For all those that are on the free account, December 1st is fast approaching us. On December 1st, all free accounts will be stopped. So if you would like to keep using the system, please contact our sales team. We're happy to talk with you and find a possible route for you to upgrade your account. And then for upcoming webinars, we're going to have Cooking with Zerion on December 21st. This is going to be different members from our implementation team and development team, bringing in different workflows and stuff that they have worked on to show the different fields it can be used in. So projects they've personally worked on, or even stuff they've tried out. So it should be a very interesting webinar, and it's going to be, I believe, one of the first times we've done something of this nature. And then on December 7th, we're going to have the iForm Builder Essentials for Project Managers. We've done this webinar a few times now, and if you haven't attended, if you are a project manager, it's really helpful to see how the experts themselves manage their accounts, get through users, use forms, so on and so forth, to really learn how to use the iForm Builder and Zerion platform. So Jonathan and Barrett, and turn it over to you guys.
Thanks a lot, MJ. So this is Jonathan over here, and Barrett is with me as well. We're both solutions engineers focusing on training over at Zerion Software. And to begin the webinar, we'd like to conduct a poll asking you if you are a current iForm Builder user.
And while you guys are filling that out, just to give you a little bit of background, as John said, my name is Barrett, and I've been with Zerion Software for about 3 years now. Both John and I focus on educating users on really implementing projects within the Zerion software platforms. So whether it's with iForm Builder or with our data flow automation or reporting, we are there to be of assistance and to really be your guide as well as make sure that you're successful. And that includes our certification program and Kickstart training programs as well. As you fill out the questionnaire that we have, I do want to remind you and actually tell some of you who are brand new to our webinars, these sessions are recorded, and after 48 hours, we'll send you a link to the recording of the session as well as access to this PDF that we have available for you. So we have some links in the PDF, and so you'll be able to go into that, download it, and actually read through the material once again. And with that, I'll go ahead and close the poll and hand it back to you, John.
Thanks, Barrett. So in today's webinar, what we're going to be focusing on data within iForm Builder. And specifically with the data, we're going to be focusing on viewing that data and also filtering that data. As your projects start to grow and the records you collect, the numbers increase, the amount of data you're going to have to filter through and view is going to also expand. And you want to be able to filter that down so that you can take a look at the subset of data that you really want to get at. So the way this webinar is going to go is we're going to begin by talking about iForm Builder data. We're going to talk about how it's structured, some of the terminology that you may or may not be familiar with so that you'll be able to follow along with the rest of the webinar. After that, we're going to transition into how to view your data. So this is assuming that you've now built a form and you've started to collect data with it, how you can go ahead and look at that data within the iForm Builder web portal. Specifically, and I don't want to get too far into this too early, we're going to be looking at the two primary ways of viewing your data, which are data views and data feeds. And I want to really spend a lot of time focusing on the differences between the two, when you want to use each one of them, and the pros and cons with each method of viewing your data. After that, Barrett's going to be talking about filtering data. So we're going to be talking about taking that set of data and looking at a subset of it. Similar to viewing data, there's two primary ways you're going to be going about the filtration of your data, and those are going to be record filters and then stored filters. And Barrett is also going to talk about the pros and cons of each one of those and when you'd want to use them. Finally, we're going to finish with talking about how you're going to take your iForm Builder data and integrate it with other systems. There's a lot of different ways you can integrate data, and I felt that the best way to demonstrate this was to show you a simple integration with our data flow automation system. And so when we get down to that end of the presentation, I'll also introduce this platform if you're not familiar with it, and I'm actually going to walk you through a real quick demo of building out an integration with the two platforms and how it would work. So to begin with, we're going to talk about your iForm Builder data and the structure of how each one of them is put together. So what I have here is we're first going to talk about an element, and an element is the basic building block of any form. All right, if you think about a paper form, an element is just going to be any point where you're collecting data, and every element is going to have two primary properties. It's going to have a label, and it's going to have what we call a data column name. The label is the outward-facing text that the user will see on their actual device when they're collecting data. So a lot of times what you'll have is you'll have your label phrased in the form of a question, or you may have it be more engaging to the data collector. The second attribute, the data column name, is going to be a database-friendly name that's stored within the form table in the database. And so that is going to be a value that the user does not see on the data collection side, but is required for the storage of each one of the records.
So John, you just said something that I think is really important for people to hear and to recognize. You said that the data column name has to be database friendly. Well, what does that mean, and how do I make sure that it is database friendly?
Sure. So if we look at the screenshot I have here, under label it says what is your first name, and then underneath that for the name, you'll see it says first and then an underscore name. So one of the most important things to understand about your data column name is that it cannot include spaces. That's part of being database friendly. Also, there are going to be certain keywords that you're unable to use within your data column name. And if you want to find a list of those, we have a list on our Customer Success Center. If you just search on there for database friendly names, you'll be able to pull up a list of all the words that are reserved, so you're unable to use those as your data column name.
So in simplest terms, I mean, when the form builder was created, was this because we needed to integrate with other systems?
Yeah, so your data column name is going to be kind of a shorthand, pared down naming convention for that element. And so what that's going to allow you to do is have a real simple and standardized naming convention for that column or for that field, so that it's going to be easier to integrate with systems later on. Okay? And so finally on this last slide, I did want to mention this screenshot at the bottom. At the top we have a screenshot from our new form builder, and underneath I took a quick screenshot from my iPad. So what you would see in the data collection side of things is the two elements that say what is your first name and what is your last name. And again, the data column name is not shown, only the label. The second data structure I want to go over are our option lists. Option lists are a cornerstone of the data collection system that we have here, and that is because with option lists you're able to predefine the values that a user is going to choose. What that's going to allow you to do is it's really going to enable you to cut down on user error. So if someone's filling in a form, they're picking from a pre-selected list of values, so you don't have to worry about them spelling something wrong or having the wrong capitalization or anything like that. Because the values are predefined, they have to choose from that set. Now, within an option list, each entry is going to have three primary properties. That's going to be the label, the key value, and the sort order. The label is very similar to what we had with elements before, where that's going to be the text that's outward facing to the data collector. So that's what they will see on their mobile device. The key value is a secondary attribute that you can choose to use as either the same value as the label, or you can make it a different value. Now, unlike the data column name, there are not as many restrictions on the key value, so you're able to either have this fully mimic the label, or in the case of the screenshot here, I have the key value for my yes and no options set to a 1 and a 0, thinking forward, knowing that I'm going to want to use those values in my integration later on.
So John, we have about 50% of our audience members who have been iForm Builder users for a while. And for those individuals who are used to building forms in our classic version of the form builder and haven't gone over to the new form builder, they've never seen sort order before. So can you kind of explain what that is and where it came from?
Absolutely. So, and this is actually really cool. Before in the classic form builder, each of your option lists would have what was called an index value. And the index value was the number and basically the ordering of the option list, and that was how you referred to each option. The downside to that was you were unable to modify the index value easily. In the new version of our form builder, we've introduced a sort order, which is going to overtake that index value. And with a sort order, you're actually able to rearrange options within the option list now. So if you wanted to, for example, switch my two choices here so that no appeared first, I could set the sort order of the no entry to 0 and then the yes to 1. And then once I resync my device and download the new option list, those two values would be flipped on the mobile device.
And that won't impact any of the data that was previously collected, right?
Nope, it doesn't impact it at all. And in fact, before, when we would store the index values on in the table, now because we have the sort order, we actually recommend that you use either the key value or the label to do the storage of your option list.
Great, thank you.
No problem. The final data structure I want to talk about, and I've saved perhaps the most complicated for last, is subforms. And so at a high level, a subform is just going to be a form that's included in another one as an element. When we describe subforms, we like to use a parent-child relationship to describe how they are related to one another. And so what that would mean is if I have form number 1 and form number 2 and form number 3, as you see below, form number 1 would be the parent form of form number 2. And so then you would refer to form number 2 as the child of form number 1. Now what's also important to understand is that subforms have a linear relationship and that they only reference either the immediate child or the immediate parent. So when I have a form that has 3 levels of depth to it, form number 2 is both the child of form number 1 as well as the parent of form number 3. And then form number 3 is the child of form number 2. However, it has no relation to form number 1. So the only way you would be able to recognize that form number 3 is part of that parent, the original form number 1, is by traversing through the relationship to understand that number 3 is a child of the second form, which is a child of the first form.
So when I'm in form 3, it's not referencing form 1.
Correct. Okay. And when it comes to subforms, when you're including them in your data collection, a subform can either be set as a one-to-one relationship, so you can think of that as one parent, one child, or a one-to-many relationship where your parent form could have multiple children, so multiple records within that subform. MJ, at this point, are there any questions from the audience that we could address?
Looks like so far so good.
All right. So for the rest of the webinar, we're going to be talking about the context of this little project that I alluded to earlier that I'm going to be building out. And so for the context of this project, we're going to keep things real simple. I've built a very basic form. The form is going to ask you for your first name, your last name, your email address, and then if you're iForm Builder certified. Now the workflow we've established is that if the user is not certified, we want to send them a follow-up email to gauge their interest and hopefully to get them to become iForm Builder certified and learn to use the platform a little bit better. And so as we go through the rest of this webinar, we're going to talk about the different levels of automation that you can have within this workflow and how viewing, filtering, and then ultimately integrating your data is going to make your workflow much faster. It's going to accelerate your ability to have that quick turnaround time and engage your customers. So the first section of this is going to be viewing your data. And what I have here real quickly is a screenshot of the data tab within your iForm Builder web portal. And I've highlighted 2 main sections, your data views and your data feeds. And within each one of these, there's varying ways that you can go about seeing the data, but they fundamentally differ between these 2 sets. What I have here now is a screenshot of both a data view as well as a data feed, and I did these by downloading them as either an Excel or an XLS file. If you look at the data view, which is at the top, you can see at the first row, the name of each column is the label that was used for that field. Moreover, for the option list field, the select that says whether you're an iForm user or iForm certified or not, you're going to see the label of the option list as well.
So before we get any further with this, John, let's just get a better understanding from the users how often they've actually gone into the data tab and have seen this, the differences or seen the different views and feeds available. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to launch a quick poll, and if the users could select how often you go into the data tab, is it on a daily basis, occasionally, rarely, or never, then that will help John and I identify a little bit better where you're coming from and how familiar you are with this view and with the different options. Okay, so John, just to share with you before I hand it back, right now it looks like 33% go in there on a daily basis, 50% occasionally, and 17% of our users or listeners never go in there.
Okay.
So hopefully those people who never go in there are ready to learn and get started.
Absolutely. All right. So picking up with where I was, we talked about the data view, export options, and again, you're using the label both as the column names as well as for your option lists. The second branch are your data feeds. And for the data feed, what you're going to see is instead of the label, you're going to have the data column name. So that first row for each of the columns, you'll see first underscore name, last underscore name, certified, and email. And those are, again, those database-friendly names that we had when we originally created each element. Secondly, for your option list, instead of seeing the label, you're now going to have the key value. And so instead of saying yes or no, you're going to see that 1 or that 0 in the data feed. And finally, on the left of the data feed screenshot, you have a whole bunch of other fields. And what these fields are is the metadata that is collected within iForm Builder. And so for those of you who don't know, metadata is just data that describes the record. Every record that's submitted to iForm Builder is going to have metadata collected and attached to it in addition to the form elements for your data collection. What I have here is a screenshot of an individual record, so it's just a single record. And at the top are the metadata fields, and it's easy to separate them because they're all capitalized. Underneath, you're going to have the record data, and those are the fields that we're going to be that were seen on your form and that you collected data with.
So the metadata that you're talking about, is that something that I as a user can ever edit?
The metadata is not editable. The purpose of the metadata, in fact, is to just report on the record itself. So it's not something that the user should ever have to input or interact with. And just so that viewers can kind of understand the intention of the metadata does a couple of things, and it fills a couple of purposes. The first one is that it's used to connect your subforms. And so anytime you have a subform, going back to that parent-child structure, you're going to have a metadata field that will link those IDs. So your record is going to have an ID, and if that record has a parent, the parent's ID will be attached to it as well. That's how iForm Builder knows that the record is a child of another form and not just a standalone record.
Now, when I look at that metadata, John, I see the word created a lot and modified a lot. Can you kind of go into detail on what the difference is?
Sure. So when you initially start your data collection and you start filling out your form and you create that record, that's going to be your metadata that's regarding the created by date, created by, created location, and the device ID. Now, after a record is submitted, it can then be further modified on the web portal. And so what iForm Builder does is it keeps track of those modifications as well. And so you'll have a set of metadata that is for the modified by, device ID, date, and location.
So it sounds like the metadata is going to capture the first time I start that form and the last time I touch that form or that record. Is there any way to see what happens in between?
Not inherently with the way it's set up. You can build mechanisms to develop like a count of how many times a record has been modified within the actual data collection. but the metadata function as it stands alone will only keep track of when it was created and when that last modified date was.
And as we continue to look at it, I see that we have the create location and modified location. And if I have the location element in my form, is this modified location and created location also valuable?
It is. And so the location element within your form, right, is going to grab the location data when you select that element. What you can do as a project manager or program manager is you can actually take the location data and compare it between what the data collector has in his form as well as the location metadata. And so, for example, if that data doesn't match up, you can draw the conclusion that the person did not collect the data where they said they did.
So this is a way that I can assure that my user is actually on site versus in their bedroom watching TV.
Yeah, that's right. And to also go over the date metadata, you can do the same thing, right, to make sure that the data was collected on the day they said it was.
So how do I know if I want to look at all the metadata or if I just want to see the labels in the views?
Sure. So going back to the difference between your views and your feeds, you're going to use your feeds if you want to do some quick reporting, you want to get kind of that quick access to looking at your data, or if you want to be able to understand and kind of read, what each column means. And a lot of times the labels are going to help you with that. Just like having your question text on the label helps the data collector on their device, sometimes having those labels as the column headings are going to help you consume that data. Now, on the other hand, you're going to use your data feeds if you're planning on integrating with another system. Because you have the data column names and the key values, those are going to normally be easier to work with on the computing side, as well as having your two systems play together nicely. You're going to minimize the amount of data cleansing and converting that you need to do when you work with your feeds as opposed to working with your data views. The last thing I do want to mention with this is the easiest way to make that determination of which one you want to use. I like to think of it as if a human is consuming the data, the view is normally going to be easier to digest. If it's going to be a computer that's consuming it, the feed works best. And that's just kind of a general rule of thumb.
So which one of these would I want to use if I want to export my data so that I can import it into a database like a SQL Server?
That's a good question, and we get that a lot. That's one of the most common integrations that we see with the iForm platform. And so if you're going to be integrating it with a database server such as SQL, that data feed is going to make the most sense, especially when you consider that because each of the columns, the names are going to be database friendly already, you're going to have a significantly lower chance of having an overlap or having some sort of a conflict when you do develop that integration.
So I know I've been asking a lot of questions, so I'm going to throw you back to where you were before, or something that you referenced previously when it comes to subforms. How is that going to appear within my view or my feeds? I mean, you said that subforms essentially are a separate entity, so what does that look like?
That's another good question. So I'm going to jump out of my presentation for a second and pull up a couple of Excel files. And what we have here is, whoops, the wrong ones. Here we go. All right. So what I have here is a parent form for a demo data collection that we've done. And within this form, it has subforms to it. And each of the subforms appear at the bottom as a separate sheet. So this child form is going to be here. And then it actually has a third layer of depth. And this child form is here as well. And again, reinforcing the data view versus the data feeds. On the left-hand side, I have my data view with the label of each of the fields. On the right-hand side, again, same thing in terms of the subform structure with the parent, the child, and the second child. But I also have the data column names here. You'll see these option lists have the key values. And finally, I also have all of my metadata at the beginning of each record.
So where is the ID for this form so I know that it connects to my subform?
Sure. So this record here has an ID of 3. If I jump down here to one of the child forms, oops, and this one may not have had one. Let me use the one above it with the ID of 6. You'll see here your parent record is going to have an ID of 6 as well. Let me make this a little larger. And that's how iForm Builder is going to create that and establish that relationship of parent-child, where if the parent's record ID is the same as the other record's base ID, then iForm knows that it is the child record of the parent. MJ, at this point, are there any other questions?
No, currently there's not, but I mean, everyone that's attending, please, even if it's a simple question, please ask. This is how we can get these, flushed out.
Yeah. All right. Before I hand this over to Bear to talk about filtering, I do want to touch real briefly on image metadata, and this is something that, again, some of the newer users may not be familiar with or aware of, and even experienced users may not be aware of. But when you take images within iForm Builder for your data collection, understand that images as well also do have metadata attached to them. When you view the actual image itself, if you can inspect that image, you're able to look at the metadata. There are also online tools where if you want to, you can copy the image URL in, and that will display the metadata for you as well. In fact, this link I have down here is where I got this screenshot for the metadata of this image. And just like your records metadata, you can do the exact same things with an image's metadata. You can verify the integrity of the GPS locations as well as the integrity of the time of when it was taken and where it was taken. Okay. And for more information about image metadata, I do have a link here at the bottom for an article on our Customer Success Center. So when you get this PDF, you will be able to click on that link and read that article if you'd like. Okay. Now, we're wrapping up with the portion of viewing your data of this webinar, and I want to revisit this context that we have for our workflow. Again, filling out this form, and if the user is not certified, we want to send them a follow-up email. Within this context and utilizing the data views or the data feeds, what we would want to do is export the records as a data view, because what I would be doing is manually looking through this spreadsheet, and then I would then check for non-certified respondents. And again, for me personally, I would use the data view because I would see that yes and no, and it may be easier for me to read that and go through the list faster. Anyone who is not certified, I would then have to grab their email address and email them manually, which can be time-consuming. But at least I do have all of the data in one location, and I can export it. I don't have to view it necessarily on the web portal at the exact same time. I could even print it out if I wanted to and have that hard copy next to me while I'm going through the emails. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this off to Bear, and she's going to talk about filtering data and how this will also ultimately impact our workflow.
Great, thank you, John. So just to quickly go over this with you, there are 2 types of filters that iForm Builder allows you to use. We have our stored filters and our record filters. And both of these have use cases where they're most powerful. We're going to start by going into record filters and talking through a little bit about why we would use them and where we would locate them. So when you're looking to add a filter, and reasons you may want to add a filter could include you try to export a data set and you receive a 500 error message saying that your data set was too large. So you can create a record filter so that you can define a date range that that record set would include, also define what elements are being shown within that specific filter. So what I really like about these filters as well is once I've created a filter, it's going to stay in place until I reset that filter. So if I want to have my project managers only see certain elements within the data sets and only export the data sets with these filters, I can create a filter, and every time they go in, they'll only see the data that I have set up with this specific record filter. Now, keep in mind, if they go and go to our Zerion Customer Success Center, they can learn how to actually create those record filters and undo those filters. But For the most part, if they're just going in and downloading and you ask them not to reset the filter, then that makes your life a lot easier as well. So I'm going to jump over into a data set to show you what that will look like. So just bear with us for 1 minute here. All right, so to start, we have we only have a couple forms here that we're given view rights for. So I'm going to go into this first form. I have 3 records, and just so that you guys know, the most recent record that was uploaded for whatever form it is, that'll always go to the top of your list. So any forms that haven't collected any data yet will always be at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go into the list view, and I can go to the list view by clicking the ID or the list button up above, and make sure I had this selected. And once I'm in the list view, then it's at the very top right-hand corner where I had this little coffee filter. So this coffee filter icon is actually where I'm creating my record filter. So once I go into my filters, I'll see a list of all the elements within the parent form. So I had 2 subforms attached to this parent form, but you'll notice I don't see those here and I don't see the elements connected. I only see that top layer. In here, I can create different conditional statements. So it doesn't have to just be a filter that you define what elements are being shown, but you actually include some conditions. I usually like to do a date range, especially if I did max out the size of my initial import and I got that 500 error. I can now go month by month and export the data by that criteria. So I'll go ahead and just select a date range here. I'll go from the beginning of November until, well, we know we haven't gone here yet, but we'll just put it in there and we'll set our filter. And once the filter has been set, my coffee filter is now filled in. And if I scroll through here, I'll only see the records that meet that criteria. Now with this use case, we actually only created the data today. That's why I still see all 3 records. If I go back to the main data tab section, then I'll notice that my coffee filter is still filled in. So this is where I can quickly identify if a record filter is still in place. I can edit it at any point, but I can also reset it. So after I've set my filters, I've exported everything I need to, I can go back into this record filter and reset it by just clicking the button in the top right-hand corner. So that's one of the filters, and the record filter to be exact, and it really can come in handy when you do receive those error messages and when you're trying to minimize what some of your users are exporting in their feeds or views.
Barrett, I had a quick question. I noticed on the form there was no element that was collecting the date or the time. If your form doesn't have those elements, are you still able to filter by your start and end dates?
We are. So what it does is it actually calls to the metadata, and that's where it's able to identify when that record was created.
Awesome.
Hey Barrett, just had a quick question come in. Is there any chance in the future that we're going to be able to modify that 500 record limit?
So the reason we get that message is because clearly the size is too large, and right now the problem we have with defining what makes something too large is a file too large is everybody's forms are different. I could have a form that has 100 questions in it, or I could have a form that has 10 different subforms in it that has maybe 50 questions each. And with that, it's hard to really define what makes or what sets the 500 error in place. In the future, I think that is something that I would recommend people going to our community forum and actually requesting that that limit be increased so that the export file size can be a bit larger. But at this time, I don't see that in pipeline. Any other questions, MJ?
No, that's it for now, Barrett.
All right, well, thank you. So besides our record filter, we have our stored filters. And the stored filters were actually created this past year, and they can be really helpful as well. So that record filter that we went through was great for that top level in the parent form, and I was able to create a quick filter to export files. But the stored filter allows me to create many different filters for a specific data set. I'm able to actually add filters to the subform records as well. So I'm not limited to just that parent form. And with this stored filter, I can then go into our table edit view, and our table edit view allows me to make changes to multiple records instantaneously. So when I was in that list view earlier and we were going through the records, if I wanted to make a change to multiple record sets, then I would actually have to go into each record to then change that value. With the table edit view and with the stored filters, I'm able to make that change in a much faster and expedited process. So in the tips and tricks here, it kind of talks about that, where we're able to do the subsets of the data, and we are able to make those changes in real time. So let's jump into a stored filter. Okay, so here we're taking the same record set that we had before, and we're going to go into our stored filter section, which is right in the very top left corner of the My Data table. And once in here, we haven't created a filter yet, so we're going to create a new filter. And we'll just call it Farm Inspection. Already we see a huge difference because we have access to the metadata. So before, when we wanted to, with the record set, we only saw the actual questions on the parent form. Now we see the metadata associated to the parent forms, and as I mentioned before, we have all the subform selected, or we're able to add filters to these subforms as well. So if I go ahead and select some of these fields, I can add rules and groups. Adding a rule could be that I only want certain farm names to appear with this data set. So let's see if we can do that. Once I choose the farm name, I can set it equal, not equal, is empty or not empty. We'll have it equal. And here's the list of all the different farms that I had within that specific data set. So I'll choose one of these. Hopefully I have one already set to that. I think I do. And I'll choose, in here, I can choose the additional, like the metadata. And let's also go into the subform and add some of those fields to this stored filter. So I know that this produce inspection is a subform because when I go to the right-hand part of the screen in our little table here, I don't have the checkbox for the sort order. So once I check produce inspection, that's where I see all of the subform elements and the metadata associated to those subform elements. So when I do the sort order, I can do ascending or descending. And if we want a priority, I can add that as well. But I'll go ahead and just add these to our stored filter. What we'll do in just a moment is I'll show you what it'll look like in our table edit view as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save my filter. In the right-hand bottom corner, I'm able to see that it was able to save. From this, if I was doing any sort of integration, I could actually copy the grammar from here and use that with my integration, so I don't have to import all the files if I didn't want to. But for now, we'll just go into our table edit view. It is loading the data. I had 3 records that met that specific farm name, and some of these fields are empty, so that means I haven't actually filled them out yet. So I can come in here, go into some of these drop downs, and I can choose some of the data. Now this could just be because we're showing it on GoToMeeting that it's not actually showing this information, but you would be able to make your selections and then it would be updated within your data table. And then the modified location and modified date and time and modified by would then be updated to my username because I'm the one logged in and making those changes. All right, before I hand it back to John, are there any questions, MJ?
No, we're all good over here.
All right.
Great. And so again, revisiting our workflow, by using the filters, we're going to be able to export only the records that meet the criteria we're looking for. So originally, where I would export the entire data set, and I would have to filter through those who are certified and not certified. By using a filter, I can go ahead and only export those records where the participants were not certified. And this way, I now don't have to do any sort of filtration on my end manually. I can just grab all of the email addresses and send out those follow-up emails. Now, the only downside to this is that that email process is still a manual labor, and I'm unable to automate that currently. The next thing we're going to talk about is integrating your data with other systems, and at that point, we're actually going to be able to automate that last part of the workflow where you're able to email each respondent. Now, what I want to do is talk about why you'd want to integrate your data. And I've alluded to this many times during this webinar, but I do want to be explicit about this. So when you set up a data integration with other systems, you're going to be getting a lot of different benefits. And those include reducing any manual preparation, like I talked about having to change the data types or having to cleanse your data. You're not going to need to do that. You're also going to be able to leverage the strengths of multiple platforms. iForm Builder is phenomenal at data collection and being able to take that collection on a mobile scale. But of course, other platforms may do the reporting a little bit stronger or may have more robust features when it comes to, for example, the email. You're also able to allow your project to scale, and this one is really, really important. So if I had a list of 5 users who were not certified, not that big of a deal. But if I have a list of, say, 100 or 1,000 users, as my project scales up, this very quickly becomes something that I cannot manually do. It's just not. It's too time intensive, and I need to look into a way to integrate my systems so that that can become an automated task, which is the final benefit. And so what we'll have here is the ultimate goal, again, going back to my workflow, is that once this form is filled out, through this integration, we're going to be able to check to see if the user is certified. If they're not, it's going to automatically send up that follow-up email. Now, while I get things set up there, if you could launch that last poll we have. This poll is going to ask you how you integrate your data. And there are options. There are a couple different ranges of options, as well as one that says Other. If you end up choosing Other, we'd like to know how you go about integrating your data. If you can just type that in the chat, that would be awesome.
And while those individuals are, I'll give you a quick nutshell or preview of what the status looks like so far. So about 33 people are exporting records into other systems. 33 are exporting records just to manually review them. And the last 33% are in that other category. And with that, I'll go and, well, actually, now that we have more people who voted, 50% export records to manually review. And so that's a big, big jump.
That is.
I'll go ahead and close the poll and hand it back.
Thanks. All right. So I've got all of my my workflow set up here. So let's talk about planning out this integration. Now, when you're integrating two systems and you're integrating your data, there's two primary methods of going about the planning, the development, and the implementation of that project. The first one is where you build each system, and then you're going to connect them at the end. When the two systems or the two platforms you're using are not kind of under the same umbrella, this is normally going to be the preferred method, and quite honestly, sometimes your circumstance will be restricted in a way where it's really going to be the only choice you have that makes sense. The second method for your project planning is going to be where you build out one system, you then establish that connection, and then once the connection is made, you then work on building out and developing that second system. And for this webinar, that's what we're going to do because we already have our form built out. So for this integration, we're going to be using Zerion's data flow automation platform to send the follow-up email for those respondents who are not iForm Builder certified. And the main takeaway here is that once this integration is complete, the system is going to run automatically, thus fully eliminating any manual review of the records or manual entry for the emails, and this will accelerate our workflow tremendously. Now I want to go over what I'm going to be doing when I establish the connection, and after I talk about this, then I'm going to show you how I actually do this. So to connect iForm Builder and the data flow automation, we're going to have to use a couple of pieces within the data flow automation, primarily a webhook, and then what is going to be called a record set. And in this screenshot over here, you'll see that the highlighted circle that says records from iForm Builder is going to be what's called a webhook. And a webhook is just going to be a unique URL where you're able to then post data to. So when you post data to that webhook, the webhook will capture the data and it will store it in the record set, which is the blue icon to the right that's labeled storage. So in the platform, in the data flow automation platform, I'm going to create this record set and webhook. After I do that, I'm going to take that URL and apply it into iForm Builder as an endpoint.
Now, while you're doing that, if I'm not using the data flow automation, do my steps change that often or that much?
They change somewhat. The initial steps might change because you're obviously not within the data flow automation platform, but endpoints are able to be used whether they are connecting to data flow automation or to other systems that you want to integrate with. So I'm just naming my data flow for now. And then within this data flow, I'm going to add a record set. Let's call this storage. I'm going to create a webhook and save this. And so what you'll see I've done is I've made a record set, which is going to hold my data, and the webhook, which is going to retrieve the data. And up here in the header, I have this long URL that's going to be the unique URL for the webhook. I'm going to click on this to copy it. I'm going to use that back over in iForm Builder as the endpoint. So I've gone under Forms to Form Assignment. I'm going to find my Data Integrations form, click on Assign, and I'm going to scroll down here to Post Data. And this is the area where you're going to set up these endpoints where every time a record is submitted, it's going to post that data to all of these endpoints that you have specified. So I'm going to make a new endpoint. I'm going to name this Data Flow Automation Webhook. I'm going to paste in that long URL I had. And then I'm going to click on Create Endpoint. Now before I do that, I do want to highlight this one checkbox here that says Use Labels. If I don't have that checked, then it's only going to give me the data column name and the value. If I do have this checked for Use Labels, not only will I get the data column name and the value, but I will also get the label attached with each element as well. If you're integrating into, say, a custom document, or actually even an email that may be more robust, that label may be useful as text that you want to implement into your template.
Now, what does guaranteed delivery mean?
The guaranteed delivery means that when a record is submitted to iForm Builder, it's going to try to post that data. If for whatever reason that data was unsuccessfully posted, it will try again at set intervals until that data is delivered successfully.
Okay, and then one more question while you're on here. You just created one endpoint that was going to assist with this project. What if I was using multiple sources or multiple software? Could I have more than one data point?
Sure, absolutely. So I've made that one data point, and you'll see it down here, Data Flow Automation Webhook. But the new endpoint was not disabled, and I'm able to create multiple endpoints. So when I have my record submitted, I could submit that record to my data flow automation, to any other integrations I have. You're not limited to only one. All right. Now at this point, I've created my data flow, my webhook, my record set, and my endpoint. And so we're going to go ahead and test this to see if it works. So I'm going to come over here to my form. I'm going to fill this out quickly. And then once I fill this out and submit it, the field or the record should show in my data flow. Okay. I'm going to say that I'm not certified.
Ooh.
Which is not true. Which is not true. I am certified. So
I can vouch for that one.
That's right, Barry. You were the one who did my certification. So I'm syncing this device now, uploading that record. Once the record's been successfully uploaded, let me go back over to my data flow automation and click on the refresh button. And you'll see that that 0 is turned into a 1. If I clicked on the record set and go to record data, you'll see that this is that first name, last name that I typed in. I get a 0 for certified, meaning that I chosen that I was not, and then my email address as well. So that shows that the connection between iForm Builder and my data flow automation has been successfully established. And as I said before in the planning phase, at this point, now that the connection is established, we're now going to work on building out the second part of the solution. And so what that's going to end up looking like is I'm going to be adding another object to my data flow. In this case, it's going to be the email object, thus integrating the email functionality with the iForm Builder data collection. And in addition to that, I'm going to add a conditional value to this action. And the condition is going to simply state that the action will only take place if the certified field is equal to 0, which was a no. So I'm going to jump back into my data flow. With the record set selected, I'm going to go to Actions and Email. I can name this whatever I would like. Now this connection is something that is predetermined, and you establish this connection securely. You'll notice that it had no credentials to it. What's nice about this is I could set up this connection, and I could even share it with Barrett or anyone else, and they would be able to use it without having my my credentials shown. Now under my condition, I'm going to set the condition here where if the record field for certified is equal to 0, that means that I was not certified. Because this is true, the email will go ahead and send. Finally, I need to fill out the options for my email. We're going to say this comes from ZerionSoftware.com. For the to, I'm going to send this to the email address that was supplied in the form. For the subject, we can say iForm Builder certification, follow-up. And then finally, I have this text already prepared for us. Let me paste this in here. And so my template is going to say hello, and then it's going to use the value of the first name. It says, are you interested in becoming iForm Builder certified? If so, please email us at training@ZerionSoftware.com. I'm going to save this. And so now you'll see my email action has been sent here. Now, if I wanted to test this all the way through, I could go ahead and create a new record. When I submit that record on iForm Builder, it should push to the webhook, which goes to the record set, which then causes the email action to trigger. One of the cool functionalities about our data flow automation platform, though, is that because I have a record already in here, I can actually rerun the data I have. And so this is useful for testing. So when I rerun this, hopefully this email action should trigger. And I have the email in my inbox here. So it says, hello, John, are you interested in becoming iForm Builder certified? If so, please email us at training@ZerionSoftware.com. And at this point, our integration has been complete.
Now that took you less than 5 minutes. And when you think about if you manually did that, it probably took you 10, 15, maybe even longer than that sometimes. So once you put this in place, you don't have to worry about it.
That's right. And so there's an initial upfront time investment in terms of setting this up. But as you saw, setting it up was not particularly time consuming. And then what's awesome about this is now that I have my integration established, each time someone fills out that form, I'm not viewing the data. I'm not exporting the data or filtering it and then manually sending that email. It's all happening automatically. So this is something that I don't have to give daily attention to anymore.
And if you wanted to, you could also use the Zerion dashboards. So you could set it up so you can see how many people are then opening the email, or I guess not opening, but how many have been certified and how many aren't certified or whatnot as well.
Yeah, so in addition to the data flow automation as well as iForm Builder, we do have other platforms that you can integrate with. The one Barrett mentioned was our Zerion report, where you're able to create dashboards and run aggregation analytics so that you can view things like KPIs and observe and monitor the health of your project. And so that's just another integration that we offer here. Now,
Jonathan?
Yes.
Actually, just had a question come in. As we're going through this, a lot of people are seeming very interested. Are there any more, resources or, tools that people could look at for integrating these systems, or, tutorials that we offer?
Yeah, there are. And so I, again, would direct anyone who's interested in this to the Customer Success Center. There's a lot of articles on there, not only about how to use each of the tools, but also kind of about, at a more high level, what each of the tools is meant to do. In addition to that, I know that the webinar I did last week, actually, on Zerion Solutions covers kind of the integration of multiple platforms and how you can use that to accelerate your workflow. That use case was a little bit more robust than what I showed today, and so if any of the viewers are interested in kind of seeing a more fleshed out use case, I would definitely recommend they watch that webinar as well. Moving forward, I also do plan on doing more webinars focusing on these integrations and how all the different platforms in Zerion can help you bring value to your organization, to your projects.
And even ZerionSoftware.com has some additional examples and, again, a high level of what we have to offer.
Yep. Were there any other questions, MJ, other than that?
No, that's it for now.
Thank you. So the last thing I do want to do during this webinar is quickly throw this to Barrett and she can talk about some of the other integration ideas that she's come up with and seen some of our users go through.
So before Zerion offered the Zerion solutions with the multiple platforms, a lot of our users would come to us and ask, how can they get started with integrating with other systems right away? And one of the tools I suggest if you want to start playing around with and really start getting a good feel of some integration options is called a Zapier. And you can access it by going to Zapier.com. So Zapier has over 500 web apps. Those 500 web apps allow you to go through and do project management, connect to project management, customer relationship, social media even. So you could use iForm for people to put in some posts, and then you could immediately have that go to Twitter. You can have it connect so that you can do billing and payment processing. There's a lot of different opportunity with Zapier, and it's a great way to just get started, especially if you're not a developer. So one thing we didn't mention yet is iForm Builder has a very substantial API. And so with our API, everything that you can do on the front end, you can actually do on the back end with the API. And that's where, as we said, we haven't really touched too much on it, but we have a lot of customer success articles on it and how to get started as well. But with Zapier, there's two pieces that come with it. We have our triggers and our actions. So once we can choose iForm Builder for either a trigger or an action, or we can actually set it up so that it's both. So with this, the different triggers we offer is to create a new user, a new form, new company profile, new record, or a new widget. So every time a new form is created, what action do we want to occur? We could also have it so that if I complete a new record, that an action could be for that record that a new user is then added to my profile. So for instance, I could build a form that my admins will fill out on their device with a new user's email address, first name, last name, username, and password, and then it'll automatically take that information and create a new user with that username, and you could have it set up so there's multiple actions. So a new user could be created, and then you can also update a form assignment for them as well. So Zapier is a great tool to really just start automating your workflow and getting a good grasp of what you're looking for in the end if you don't have a clear picture. There are tons of different other alternative tools out there for reporting, for dashboards, for PDF generations, for connecting to a map like ArcGIS Online, and iForm Builder with the post URL and with some of the feeds, we're able to have that integration available for you.
Thanks, Barrett. And so to close out this webinar, I do want to quickly go over our different support and resource options. We've mentioned these a couple of times. The one we always end up coming back to, and is at the very top for a reason, is the Customer Success Center. That is going to be your central location for really all things regarding support and regarding things that are going to empower you to use the platforms to the greatest of their potential. We have a lot of content on there, ranging from official knowledge-based articles to guided tutorials, both in text and also as videos. And there's also a section on there where the community can interact with one another. And we've found a lot of great success stories from people sharing things that they've done with iForm Builder and extending the functionality of the platform. The last thing I want to talk about regarding the Customer Success Center is that there is a section for release notes. And so for any of you who are using the platforms that we offer, it's always good to stay up to date with the releases that we have so that you are aware of any new features and functionalities that we develop. And so under the Customer Success Center, if you want to find the release notes section, you can do that. And there are release notes for iForm Builder, for the data flow automation, for reports, and all of the other platforms that we offer. Okay. MJ, at this point, are there any final questions?
Looks like we're good to go.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and speak on the behalf of MJ and Barrett and thank everybody for tuning into this webinar and for also being part of our Zerion family. In the next 48 hours, as we said earlier, you're going to be getting a recording of this session. You'll also be getting an email with a PDF attached to this, as well as the form packages that we've had that we showed and demonstrated today. All right? I hope everyone has a great rest of the day and stay safe during these holidays, and hope to see you all soon at the next webinar.